My name is Marc Moncion. I'm the head of safety and compliance and regulatory affairs at Fleet Complete. Just a little background on myself. I'm a former DOT MTO inspector here in Canada. I've done a significant amount of work across North America. I'm considered humbly a subject matter expert in the industry. I have over 25 years of experience, both as a truck driver, as a regulator working in government. I've worked with private fleets. I've worked as the head of safety for the largest trucking insurer in Canada. I sit on several federal, state, provincial regulatory bodies, including the electronic logging device mandate that was passed in the United States in 2017. And I also sit on the Canadian working group as well for the Canada ELD. I'm considered a social media influencer. I have over 14,000 LinkedIn followers. If you'd like to join me on my LinkedIn account, I also have a transportation safety professionals discussion group where I post a lot of information. I've written 3 books on the transportation of dangerous goods in Canada, Hazmat in the United States. I've also written a book on a driver's guide to hours of service in Canada and United States. I'm the author of the Ask the Expert blogs at the Fleet Complete site that you see the link at here. And I'm also part of Mark's Safety Corner, which is a YouTube section where I have a whole host of videos. Most recent was just published this morning. If you want to take a look at it, it's a day in the life of a truck driver. I'm also a fully licensed CDL holder, and I can drive all types of commercial motor vehicles. At the end of the day, safety, trucking is built into my DNA. I live and breathe this, and I'm very passionate about this industry. So let's start off with what is the compliance, safety, and accountability. So at the highest level, CFA is an enforcement program that's used by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration in the US. And the goal is to monitor the safety record of all registered motor carriers in the United States, and also carriers that are Canadian or Mexican domiciled will also have to comply with these rulemakings. So the CSA is very important to every motor carrier, including owner-operators, because FMCSA use this to identify, prioritize, and intervene with large trucks and bus carriers who pose the highest safety risks on our highway. You keep your fleet on the road by adhering to these FMCSA rules and taking any corrective action when necessary. FMCSA takes this very seriously. They analyze over 3.5 million roadside inspections, over 100,000 crash reports. They look at all violations, investigations, and crash reports within the last 2 years. Your driver's performance is included in your records, so it's essential that you know what your CSA scores are all about and take remedial action if and when you have a driver that is deteriorating your record. Just as an FYI, FMCSA launched CSA in 2010, and after 5 years, they have piloted out through all of the United States and in Canada. And FMCSA makes enhancements to CSA from time to time, and they continue to work on this program to really take action against carriers that need to be addressed going forward. So as I said, more than 5.5 million trucks and buses on the road. There's over 250 motorists in the United States. It's really the only industry where you have the motoring public interacting with trucks. So trucks are held to a higher standard. It looks at preventable crash causes, lives and livelihoods that could be impacted if in the event something happens to go badly on the highway. So there's some strong safety practices that are good for business and make roadways more safer for everybody. There really is 3 core components to the CSA program. The first is the Safety Measurement System, or SMS. There are interventions that take place, and there are safety fitness determination ratings to determine the fitness of motor carriers. I'll provide an overview of all these 3 elements, and then we'll take a closer look at each of them, starting with the SMS. Through the SMS, the CSA has analyzed data from roadside inspections, really anything that happens at roadside, violations. There's also off-road investigations that occur from time to time. In my former role as a DOT inspector, I also worked as an auditor, and there were occasions where carriers who had records that would deteriorate would result in my having to intervene and attend at their place of business. The second element of the CSA program is the safety intervention process. So at a highest level, the intervention is an enforcement action that may take when a carrier's performance indicates a potential safety risk. And the FMCSA intervention will look at why the safety problems are occurring, will recommend remedial action, will encourage corrective action, and when necessary, will invoke penalties on carriers who do not comply. The whole safety fitness determination rating is the core of the program, and it's part of 49 CFR Part 385. We'll move on now to look at how does CSA affect you as a motor carrier. So essentially, it affects you, including motor carriers, by identifying carriers with safety programs and problems. It also, as I said, prioritizes carriers for interventions and affects your drivers because their performance at roadside will also impact you. So if you have a driver that's not operating vehicles correctly, that will also affect you in a negative way. The key point I want to address here is these safety interventions are based on a 24-month period. So, you know, the number of violations, you have speeding offenses, perhaps fatigue driving under hours of service, if you have some crashes. It will also look at the severity of these interventions, and they're actually measured with the highest likelihood of involving a crash will then translate into a higher threshold point. When these safety violations occur, you'll also see as we go through the slides that recent events are pointed heavier than others, and we'll look at that specifically as we go through the rest of the slides. The next point I want to mention is that the SMS data is looked on 7 behaviors, and we'll look at those 7 behaviors in further slides as well. So how the prioritization works. So essentially your safety performance in each basic is measured in 2 ways, by the measure and by the percentile. Your basic measure only reflects your company's safety performance. The SMS will then calculate your measure on each basic by combining the time and the severity weighted for each type of violation or crash. So you want to remember the most recent safety violations are weighted more heavily. So you could be operating a series of vehicles issue-free for a number of months, and then all of a sudden, things can quickly go sideways for a number of factors. And because these incidents occur within the last 6 months, they're going to be weighted ×3. And as we get to that slide, I'll show you exactly how that works. Thereon, your basic percentile is calculated based on your measure and reflects your safety performance compared to other carriers with similar events. So think of it as motor carriers of the same size are all in the same sandbox, and you are measured and compared with carriers of like size. So if you're a 10 fleet truck operator, you're in the same box as other 10 fleet truck operators. You're not going to be compared with a 2,000 fleet operator because that would not impact, that would impact you in a fairly negative way. So what the FMCSA has done is through their analytics, they are able to measure bell curve. And again, I'll show you this as we go forward, carriers that require remedial attention. So as a carrier, you'll be grouped and ranked on your basic with other similar carriers in the events. And at a high level, you want to have as low a score as possible. So 0 is your impeccable carrier. As you get up in numbers and hit thresholds, that's when your risk elements will go up. The higher the basic percentile, the worse the performance is. So we'll move on to what the SMS does in fact consider. There's a number of safety violations, inspections, the severity, as I mentioned earlier. They generally identify severe non-compliance in need of corrective action. These are what are called acute and critical violations. And I'll just give you some examples of what those could be. They're listed on the FMCSA's website as well, but some examples are failing to provide a security awareness training if you're hauling hazardous materials, failing to provide in-depth security awareness training in those same circumstances, if you're knowingly allowing, requiring, permitting, or authorizing an employee with more than one commercial driver's license to operate a vehicle, requiring or permitting a property carrying driver to exceed driving by more than 11 hours, that's an egregious or acute critical violation. And one final example, if you're carrying property, is allowing a driver to drive if more than 8 hours have passed since the end of your last 8 hours in a sleeper berth, or if you haven't taken your 30-minute break. So these are just a few of these acute and critical violations, and there are more, and I have a link to that as we go through the slides. Now, in terms of the 7 basics, these basics help the carriers to understand where you're having safety programs so that you can correct them. Each basic will address specific requirements in the FMCSA's regulations under CFR 49. The 7 are unsafe driving, crash indicators, hours of service compliance, vehicle maintenance, controlled substances and alcohol, hazardous materials, and driver fitness. These basics will help you understand where you stand in terms of safety compliance with the FMCSA's regulations. Each basic also addresses specific requirements in regulation and focuses on behaviors that are linked to crash risk. For instance, unsafe driving relates to parts 392 and parts 397 and refers to the operation of vehicles by drivers in a dangerous and/or careless manner. Some examples of roadside violations may cause a carrier to rank very poorly in these basics. These include speeding, reckless driving, improper lane change, inattention. I have more that I'm going to talk about as we go through each specific basic. Now, the next thing I want to show you is, in fact, the basic thresholds, because they're different. And you want to think of these thresholds as essentially where the targets will occur. It's like a milestone, and it's really a milestone that you don't want to achieve. So under the SMS, if you hit 2 of these 7 basics, the chances are very likely that you are going to be subject to increased intervention by FMCSA. So under hours of service, you have a 60% threshold, which what that means is, as I mentioned earlier, you're a fleet of 10 trucks, you're in a sandbox with 10 truck companies in that same sandbox. If you achieve a 60% threshold under your hours of service compliance, what that means is that you are doing worse than 60% of the same like-minded carriers. Under driver fitness, it's 75%. Controlled substances, 75. Same thing for vehicle maintenance. Hazardous materials, if you're at the 80% threshold, you are doing poorly more than 80% of the other like-minded carriers. Crashes are at 60%, and unsafe driving is at 60% as well. So what I want to leave you with is that if any 2 of these 7 thresholds you hit as a motor carrier, when your vehicles are going at a truck inspection station, that you're having a high likelihood of your vehicles getting the park light by the inspector. Again, I used to work in a truck inspection station, and that's essentially how that works. They're not just randomly, occasionally there's random inspections, but the focus is on the bad apples, if I can use that term. So if you're getting parked a lot, you can reasonably expect that you're likely going to have an audit thereafter. And the other thing that happens is what's called our time markers. So what's happening is an auditor is actually marking the times where your vehicle is traveling in certain locations at certain times, and that is being recorded for audit purposes thereafter. So it's very vital to stay on top of this because things can go sideways pretty quickly. It's vital to safety, the health of your business, and make sure your drivers stay compliant at all times. Now, in terms of the SMS methodology, as I alluded to, the data is gathered for a period of 24 months. So it's a 24-month window. It places carriers in these violations or crashes into the basics as I have described, It converts the basics into quantifiable measures and rates that are used to determine whether or not additional intervention will be generated towards certain carriers based on their performance. So the one point I want to stress is, regardless of what I've just said, FMCSA does not assign safety ratings and scores or points to drivers. So if you have drivers asking you that question, even though these activities will show up on your record, it's measuring you as the motor carrier and not your drivers. Going into more detail with the 7 basics, I wanted to just highlight the different parts in the US regulation that are impacted by these basics, just for your information. So unsafe driving, Part 392 and 97. Hours of service, Part 392 and 95. Driver fitness under Parts 383 and 391. Controlled substances and alcohol under Part 382 and 92. Vehicle maintenance under Part 392, 393, and 396, which is really the main part under maintenance. The Hazmat Compliance under Part 397, and there's a whole host of subparts there. And there's also the crash indicators as well. I alluded to this earlier, but I want to get just into greater detail, because when you look at your scores on your SMS, you may want to better understand how the weighting occurs and how the severity occurs. So at the highest level, there's a time weight. So incidents that occur in the last 6 months are time weighted at 3. So when you look at the examples I'll show you further down in the slides, I'll give you an example. Say speeding at a certain rate of speed about a posted speed limit. If it happens within the last 3 months and that speed level is assigned a total of 7 points, because it's happened in the last 6 months, it's multiplied by 3. So on your score, it really reflects a weighting of 21 points. Once it goes beyond the 6-month to the 12-month threshold, you'll notice that the point score for that same violation will then be time factored by 2. So suddenly the 21 points becomes 14 points. When you continue to evolve between 12 months and 24 months, that weighting score will drop to 1. So now you're going from 21 points to 14 points to 7 points. So you can appreciate that as time moves, your scores will improve. Now, the only caveat to that is, as your days are moving, you're dropping on points, but you're also gathering points if new events are occurring on your profile. So this is why you have to really maintain control. You really have to explain and understand and make it clear to your drivers how their safety performance can impact you. The other is the severity weighting. It increases weighting of violations shown to create a greater risk of crashes. So again, we'll go through a couple of the slides down the road, and you'll see the more serious the violations, the higher the weighting will be. There's also just the way the severity weight cap, it limits the total severity weight on a single inspection. So if you have multiple issues on an inspection, it'll be based on a single inspection. It's capped, whereas the cited section only counts 1 per inspection. And there's also segmentation. So in other words, it segments the carrier population into groups, like I said earlier, like size-minded groups. I'll do that after. So we'll look at more specifics in terms of the 7 basics and just give you a high level. Unsafe driving, it includes speeding, reckless driving, improper lane changes, following too closely. HOS compliance, there's a whole host, and I can send you a list I can post. The FMCSA has done a very good job of describing all of the violations so that you understand what they are and what the severities are. So examples are form and manner, which are more on the lower scale, whereas operating a commercial motor vehicle while ill or fatigued has a very much higher severity weighting. Going over any of the regulatory maximums will also assign higher ratings as well. Under driver fitness, it's really operating a vehicle by a driver who's unfit to operate due to either a lack of experience or medical qualifications. So that includes failing to have a valid license or a properly class of license, or if you're operating a vehicle with hazmat and you don't have a hazmat endorsement, or you haven't completed the medical requirements, say in the United States, that will also impact your driver fitness scores. You have controlled substances and alcohol. If you're allowing, or you know of a driver, or you are a driver and you're operating while impaired due to alcohol, illegal drugs, or misuse of prescription medications, over-the-counter medications, use of or possession of controlled substances. So as an example, there are some states, and there are in Canada, the availability of cannabis. If you're operating under such a drug, that will impair your ability to drive, and that will cause issues with this basic. There is the vehicle maintenance basic, which is essentially failing to properly maintain a vehicle, or cargo security. This one has a lot of activity based on my experience as a former auditor, inspector, and also working for one of the largest motor carriers in North America. A lot of issues with brakes, lights, mechanical defects, failures to make the required repairs. So in other words, your driver has listed on their driver vehicle inspection report, say a minor defect under the CVSA out of service criteria. It's been marked. The driver continues to mark it, has been back to your terminal. The vehicle is then subsequently dispatched onto the road with these defects still present. You've had the opportunity to correct these defects. For whatever reason, as a motor carrier, you have not done so. That will then impact your maintenance basic. And the last one, but not the least, I have listed here is cargo security. The next category is Hazmat Compliance, and one of the 3 books I wrote was actually on Hazmat Compliance, so I'm humbly an expert in this field as well, but it involves the unsafe handling of hazmat in the United States. Examples are hazmat packages that are not properly loaded or secured on the vehicle, shipping papers that are not provided or don't include the proper shipping name in the proper categories that they're listed, the class, the division, the order that the shipping document must be described, training of drivers not having a valid training certificate, and placards, markings, and labels on small packages that are not provided or affixed to either the package or the vehicle if the vehicle is deemed to be the means of containment. The next one is crash indicators. This one here is essentially just a history or patterns of high crash involvement, including frequency and severity. You know, you could have one high profile serious crash with multiple fatalities, and you could have a pristine SMS score. That's all it would take. You know, we've had instances of high profile crashes. We had one unfortunate one here in Canada where a number of kids were killed on a bus, and that was like a serious high severity. That is immediate sanction off the road. You could have a pristine 0% SMS rating, and you can be placed off the road immediately for that. In terms of prioritization, you know, the calculation as I described, it only considers individual carrier performance. The violations are based on carrier violations and crashes, as I mentioned, by weight and time. You're grouped, as I said, with other like-minded carriers. From a scale perspective, 0 to 100, with 100 meaning you are the worst carrier in your sandbox and you never want to be there. So I mentioned earlier, I mentioned again some of the serious violations, you know, false records, false reports on duty statuses for HOS, failing to conduct random controlled substance testing. One of your drivers are stopped, they detect alcohol, cannabis, they can smell it, they can see evidence of ashes in the truck or something to that effect. That could trigger an audit, and at time of audit, the auditor will go in and see, I want to see your random substance testing program. If you don't have such a program, it's considered a serious violation. knowingly allowing, requiring, or permitting the driver who is disqualified to drive. And that could be something as simple as a driver has neglected to complete his medical requirements and has been downgraded as a driver. If you don't know that, the driver can be stopped at roadside and can be downgraded. So I've put here, just for your benefit, just a list of serious violations, and these are updated, but if you go at that link below, you can click on that and it'll take you directly to what are these serious violations. So really what carriers should know, number one is you're accountable for the performance of your drivers. All the inspections, all the violations your drivers receive while they work for you remain part of your score. They stay with you, they count for 24 months. You don't inherit any past violations of a newly hired carrier, but you really want to use this program to sort out who are drivers that have a pattern of and frequency of violations. You can get driver performance scores by going on the SMS. These roadside inspection data, they remain part of a driver's record for 3 years, and crashes remain for 5. So you can easily access these records, and it shows a real due diligence on your part prior to hiring to make sure you're hiring the right kinds of drivers. What type of safety data you can review? First, it's important to understand what you can do logging in as a motor carrier and what safety data also other people can see. Your competitors can see your records. They can see your scores. Your insurance company, every time you're up for a renewal of your insurance, they will look at your scores as well. The table above provides a breakdown based by user. The public view is available to everyone. It includes the basics for all carriers with the exception of Hazmat and Crash Basics. Once you log into your own SMS, you can view all your own company's basics, and that would include Hazmat and crashes. You can also see the driver's names per inspection. You can download the inspections and you can download the crash data. The last part is enforcement. So FMCSA, US DOT, they can see all of the safety data on your SMN profile. All of these activities, just so you know, on your score are all date stamped. So you should be reviewing this periodically, because don't forget, these are time records. These are time markers that are used by FMCSA. If they're ever going to audit your carrier operation, they're going to use this data. You know, again, I used to be an auditor, and I can tell you, when I used to show up at a motor carrier's place of business, 80% of my work was done already. I already knew who I wanted to talk to. I already knew which records I wanted to see. I already knew which drivers I wanted to check their hours of service. It's all there. It's all straightforward for you. So you should really give some thought to being proactive, taking some action. Like, we don't live in a perfect world. You know, drivers will make mistakes. Things happen. We're all human. But what the key is, what are you doing in response to what is occurring at roadside? If you're taking some due diligence to mitigate and you are documenting what is happening, that is going to go a long way to helping you out down the road. So the next thing I just wanted to quickly show you, I put at the very top, that is the CSA login portal for you. You have your US DOT number, you should have your US DOT PIN number, and you would log in on this screen to see your records. If you look at this next screenshot, it just basically, I use the vehicle basic score, and I want to use this for illustration purposes. So if you look at this motor carrier, his or her threshold right now is at 45%. If you see that on the chart, the threshold is 80%, as I mentioned earlier. So on this carrier's performance, his measure is 4.52 or 45%. That means that he is performing more poorly than 45% of the same like-minded carriers in his or her sandbox. Once you achieve the 80% threshold, that becomes problematic. So as you get more and more recent inspections, remember what I said, they're time weighted by 3. So if you hit this 80% threshold and you happen to hit a second basic at that threshold as well, you have now been put into the higher priority risk by the FMCSA. So again, here, I just wanted to show you, this one has the vehicle maintenance basic. There were 22 violations based on 11 vehicle inspections. Now, when you look at your inspections, you know, there's nothing wrong with inspections. In fact, you want to get some inspections because good inspections are going to help you out. So here's another example. The same motor carrier, it could tell you based on a monthly period what type of inspections are occurring where. So you can see here in terms of inspections, they've peaked out in the months of March and May. You have other inspections in July, and then it kind of goes dormant from August through to November with a few more in December and January. Just as a heads up to everybody on this call, road check is taking place between the 4th and 6th of June 2019. This is going to be a random inspection 24/7 at every truck inspection station across North America. So you want to raise that awareness with your drivers. You want to raise that awareness with your fleets. You want to know that the mechanics are servicing the vehicles properly, because this is a high profile event taking place in the coming weeks. So the next thing I want to show you is, this is a more detailed screenshot. When you expand. So when you expand this, I just want to give you an example. You can see here on these 11 inspections, you can see from top to bottom, there was a tractor, first inspection on the 16th of May, 0 severity weight, a time weight of 3 with a total score of 0. What that means is your driver was stopped with a truck tractor and passed. It was a clean inspection. These are great. You want to see a bunch of clean inspections on your record. That's what you want. The thing that you want to be mindful of is each one of these inspections, you see the highlighted under number, you can click on that number and that takes you to the specific inspection. That's the inspection at roadside. And you can see exactly what's taking place there. And you can also see the time marker. So in other words, driver arrived either at a way station or stopped at roadside, 6:45 a.m. until 7:10 a.m. And that's a time marker, and that's used by the DOT. So if you look at some of the others, the next one here, you see on the 24th of April, 2014, you see this one has a severity weight of 2 with a time weight of 3, which gives a total weight of 6 points. And then it gives you the actual violation. That is an inoperative required lamp under part 393 times 0.9. Now that's what they call a violation. Now, a violation doesn't mean a citation. That's a completely different thing altogether. So I want you to be mindful of that. That is strictly the inspection violation. And you want to look, you'll see on the inspector's report, it's going to say, it's going to have an acronym that says OOS. OOS means out of service. If your vehicle has been placed out of service, likely your severity weight will be higher, and your driver or your vehicle, in fact, will have been placed out of service. And you may be aware, if not, vehicles get placed out of service, as do drivers get placed out of service. So I'm just going to go on a few more here. The next one, I just want to jump at you. You have a clean inspection at 0 points. And this is how the next one on the 27th of February, this is where things can get sideways pretty fast. So you see here, you got a time weight of 5. You've got a time weight of 3, so that's happened within the last 6 months, for a total weight of 15. So one incident has attributed 15 weighted points on your SMS. The specific violations are inoperative required lamps under 393.9, no spare fuses as required under 393.95B, and a windshield wiper inoperative. Now, when you're looking at that, you're saying, like, is that really serious? Well, it's based on the SMS profile. And you don't see that they're out of service, but you have a total, and you can see to the right, 2, 2, and 1 point. That's the severity point for each one of those violations, for a grand total of 5 points, time weighted 3 to be 15. So you can keep on going through the screens, but this is where, you know, I'm going to take you to, like, you can see the other time weights. You have one here at the very bottom, and I want to point that one out to you as well. That one there is on the 29th of March 2013, you can see how the time weight's gone down to 1 point, right? So in that case, there are 29 points on one inspection. And you can see the OOS. OOS means out of service. So in this case, under part 396.7, unsafe operation, forbidden operation. So this was a serious acute violation. And this is a snapshot of a real carrier. So this is something, of course, I've obliterated the name, but this is a real life thing that happened. Can you imagine that? 29 points on one inspection. Had that been within the last 6 months, you can multiply that by 3. And that's how things on the performance measure can go sideways pretty quickly. So I just wanted to highlight that for your benefit. So what happens after that? So your safety data is really key to your business. If you don't have a satisfactory rating, you're not going to stay in the trucking business very long. It affects your safety record, the FMCSA, the public, other people on the highway, safety stakeholders. You know, as I said, some of your partners that you do work with, some of the shipping community, they'll look at your scores, and this could be the difference between you being allowed to continue to operate and losing business. This could be the difference between a very modest insurance premium increase to a substantial increase per truck that could really impact your bottom line. So as I said, you know, a score of 0 to 100, with 100 being the worst performance in that peer. So what you really want to consider is you want to leverage your profile scores to focus on these specific you can use Fleet Complete. Our solution will help bridge your compliance gap because we have tools. Again, I'm not working in sales here. I'm a safety guy, but I'm telling you, our solution really can help you bridge your gaps. Use the tool, whatever you're signed up for. It'll give you some driver benchmark scores. It'll show you, depending on the type of solution you're using, if your drivers are speeding, harsh braking. There's a whole host of behaviors that are at your disposal, but it's really using the data to your benefit. You want to educate yourself. You want to educate your clients. You want to work with your drivers. You want to point out, you know, not just the nasty things that happen, but celebrate all the safety performance of your drivers as well. You know, if they're driving, you have a driver who's consistently operating safely, he will never show up on your scores. He will otherwise be under the radar. You should be publicly celebrating these drivers, publicly celebrating the good work, because that will just build right into the DNA of the safety culture of your company. So again, you want to raise your safety compliance awareness. You want to review all your inspections, all the violation history over the past 2 years. You want to take remedial action, and you want to document that. That is something, as a former DOT auditor, where motor carriers go sideways is when they don't document stuff. Once the DOT shows up, you know, you can say whatever you want that you've taken action, but if it's not on paper, it did not happen. It's as simple as that. So you want to review these basic assessments. You want to help your drivers to address safety programs using our Fleet Complete solution. You want to educate your clients, and by that, your clients are your drivers, stakeholders, on how they can improve their safety performance. You want to raise the awareness of how their driving record is, or driving performance is impacting your safety scores. Now there's another thing. I have a separate section, or it's going to be like a separate webinar, and it's going to be focused specifically on DataQs. Now, I don't know if those in the audience are familiar with DataQs, but DataQs is a system that allows you as a motor carrier or a driver to file a request for a data review. You can identify concerns about the data. You know, FMCSAs, like motor carriers, like Fleet Complete, like your shipper community, like mistakes happen. You know, they could inadvertently put the wrong data on your stat. If you're not reviewing it, it affects you in a negative way, but you have the opportunity to get a resolution of these data points that are not attributed to your performance. So I want you to take advantage of that. When you review your SMS profile, If there's anything that's attributed, like I've seen instances where drivers have gone from one motor carrier to another, they get stopped, they then surrender the wrong DOT information to the inspector, who then writes the wrong DOT number and it shows up on your score. So you want to take advantage of this DataQ opportunity to get this corrected. You can file an RDR, but the things to remember, you got to be very specific. You got to write specific detailed explanations. You got to attach relevant supporting documents. Take pictures, whatever you think will help you out, you should do. If you're dealing with owner-operators, include the lease agreement for your owner-operators. You want to ensure your contact information is accurate. You want to periodically check the status of your RDR just to see how things are coming along. If you're a motor carrier and you bombard FMCSA with DataQs, you're probably not going to be as successful. You want to, I guess for better lack of a word, you want to pick your battles. You want to pick the ones that you know you could win, the ones that you know that you're going to have success. So as part of that, I've just included a link for you here. It's additional tips on how to file your DataQs, and there's a best practice manual. But like I said, if there's interest in DataQs as a separate webinar, that is something we are likely at Fleet Complete after we get feedback from the audience. If you're interested, we will do a separate segment just on DataQs for you. So in terms of requests for data reviews, they can only be submitted for violations that were erroneously reported or incorrectly documented during the inspections. Examples, you know, if you have a driver that has been terminated, if you were involved in a crash and it's been deemed that the crash was not your fault, you want to make sure you have all the proper documentation for that. If a driver caused a specific violation, if an owner operator or another carrier committed the violation while they were leased to your operation, I used to see a lot of those occur. So it's very important to have a really tight relationship with your owner operators. And the thing that is so key right on the front end, you have a policy that's written and signed by all your drivers, your owner operators, and say, anything that happens at roadside, good, bad, ugly, doesn't matter, you must report that to us. The worst thing that I used to find is I call the deer in the headlight, where I'm at a carrier's place of business and I have their SMS scores with me, and they're unaware of some of these violations because number one, they haven't checked recently. Number two, someone has left their operation and they haven't kept their eye on the ball. And this could go sideways, as I said, pretty quickly. So I would suggest a written policy, any incident, good, bad, ugly, clean inspections, out of service, citations, warnings, near misses, anything has to be reported. In terms of the CSA, 3 core components, just touching a little bit upon the safety intervention process. There's really a wide array of interventions at FMCSA. They use this to address problem areas. They're trying to get ahead of the crashes. There's the safety management cycle. It's a process that they help pinpoint safety programs and take proactive or corrective action before a crash occurs. Things such as a warning letter they will issue to alert carriers of safety issues and consequences failing to correct them. To provide a chance to improve. Like the FMCSA, they don't want to sanction motor carriers. You know, they want everybody just to play by the same rules. And you know, you hear a lot about hours of service and the ELD mandate in the United States, but you know, it's really keeping everybody on the level playing field and people operating under the same rules. It's taking the gray matter out of drivers' ability to be very creative with their logs, if I can say. You know, there are investigations. I used to do a lot of investigations. They're done remotely. We do a lot of time markering and observation of motor carriers, documentation requests, showing up at fleets, doing very focused interventions. So in other words, you have 7 basics and 2 are problematic out of the 7. The FMCSA will focus on those problem areas. They're not going to do a full-blown unless there are issues that are comprehensive in sight. So in other words, where there's smoke, there's fire. There's issues in all the basics. You can, depending on your fleet size, you know, I remember spending up to 3 weeks at a carrier's operation Mind you, it was a large carrier, but if it's problematic, you know, they'll be setting up shop and getting to know your staff very well. But you don't want someone like me coming in to visit you at the highest level. There's also some corrective actions that are taken, cooperative safety plans. They may ask you to set up a safety plan to improve. There'll be notice of violations for these serious violations to warrant formal action, but not a civil penalty. There's some notice of claims where the violations are enough to warrant an assessment and an issue of civil penalties. You can go on the FMCSA's website and they have a whole list. It's an Excel spreadsheet of some of the civil penalties that have been issued. And I'm telling you, like, as they get more serious in nature, they are definitely going in your pocketbook. So you want to be very aware of that. And they can also issue an out of service order. So basically you have a fleet of 100 trucks. We have serious concerns. We are going to place 20 of these out of service for a month, and you can't operate these 20 trucks, and that could very well bankrupt you as well. So that's not something FMCSA wants to do, but that type of power is available at their disposal. I just want to give you just a high level of like the cycle, you know, the having policies and procedures, roles and responsibility, qualifications and hiring processes, training and communications within your operations, monitoring and tracking issues, and at the highest level, as I said earlier, taking meaningful action. If you follow this safety management cycle, you have written processes in place, you are taking action when things come across your desk, it'll go a long way to helping you out down the road. And how you can use your SMS, it can help you identify trends. It could help you see what type of violations and the crash history on your SMS. It could help you detect potential process breakdowns that are contributing to violations. You know, it could assess why these breakdowns are occurring. It could help you identify some safety improvements that you may want to incorporate if you want to keep on operating. These safety investigators at FMCSA will walk you through this SMS process during their investigations, and they've also provided a tool, you know, tools for helping you with your SMS scores. So if you want to take a look at that, you know, I sent you a link here, and I think that would be very helpful. The last thing I wanted to share with you is just, you know, staying connected. That's so key. You know, you want to visit the Motor Carrier Resource Center, FMCSA. You can sign up for some important updates. You can contact FMCSA if you have some questions or concerns. You can download some brochures from FMCSA as well. And I have a whole bunch of questions here. I'm just gonna take a look at a couple here. I don't know if I'll be able to get through all of them, but as I said, if I don't answer this question on your call, because I've gotten a whole bunch of them, you can look through our website at it's at the very end of the Q&A. See the address, find your answers. It's at Marc Safety Corner. So if I don't get to your answer today, it'll be posted at this Marc Safety Corner. And if you want, you can also go to that site and re-ask the question if I didn't get to you. But my commitment is to answer any and all questions. So I had one here. Are carriers outside of the United States, so in other words, Canada and Mexico, impacted by the CSA program? Well, the answer is yes. So CSA will affect carriers outside of the United States. So Mexican, Canadian carriers are subjected to the same rules as any other carrier transporting passengers and cargo. Next question, how can carriers successfully navigate the CSA program? Well, I think I've given you a fair bit of information here already, but there's a lot of steps. You know, you want to check and update. You want to review your records. You really want to sign up. Get the based on your DOT number and your PIN number. Get an up-to-date of your scores. You want to pay attention to the number of power units and vehicles that you travel. That is very important because it's used as part of the profile. You want to monitor and review your basics regularly. You want to take a look at that. It's a great site. It's very easy to use. You want to maintain copies of inspection reports. You want to keep all the evidence related to any observed violations. And you want to take advantage of the DataQ items as well. Where can you go to get some of your CSA questions answered? Well, you can browse the CSA website. There's a help center there. You can ask for any documentation that covers the different aspects of CSA. You can check their website. There's a couple of methods you can reach out to them. There's a CSA feedback page. You can even call the CSA group. It's 1-877-254-5365 is the telephone number if you ever want to reach them. Things that you can do to improve as a motor carrier. Well, you want to ensure compliance. You want to be knowledgeable about all the regulations. Knowledge is dangerous. Knowledge of hazmat if you're hauling hazmat. Understand that your safety management programs contribute either in a good way or a bad way to your problems. Very, very key. You want to update your MCS-150 carrier registration information whenever there's a change to your company's profile. If there's anything in the last 2 years, you want to update that. You want to review all your inspection and crash report data. You want to request corrections through the DataQ program as needed. You want to educate yourself and your employees on the regulations and industry best practices. There's really a whole wealth of information available in this connected world. I've got another question here. How does a carrier receive their actual rating? Well, a carrier can only receive their safety rating following an on-site investigation. By that, I mean a compliance review as defined in Part 49, CFR 49, Part 385. This would be conducted at your carrier's place of business. The rating will either be satisfactory, conditional, or unsatisfactory. If ever this happens, chances are they already have you on their radar anyway. So these safety rating methods can be found under 49 Part 385. The safety rating is issued to a carrier based on the results of their on-site investigation. FMCSA will upgrade the safety rating if a carrier prevails in the administrative review. If you're improving, your record can be evolving from conditional back up to satisfactory. I've got a question about acute and critical violations. I already spoke at length about that. There is a site, and I'll post it at Marc's Safety Corner on these different types of critical violations that occur. So I've got some more here. Here's one. Do we have to keep random test certificates in each truck? So I'm not quite sure. I'm thinking, Daya, you're asking it's about drug and alcohol testing. You could keep that at your home site, but really the first line of proactiveness is to ensure that you have, in fact, a random drug and alcohol testing program on site. Where do you find your company's SMS? Well, that's right on the website. I sent you the link to that, and you should have no issues finding your SMS and entering your PIN number. So again, if you're trying to get through, there's the help center through FMCSA. They'll walk you through how to get access to your PIN and how to sign up to the SMS program. Can you go over the time, weight, and number again, please? Not clear on how the number is selected to be added. So the time weight, I'll go back to the slide. So time weighting is based on when an actual event has occurred. So again, I'm just going to the slide here. So if you have a violation that's occurred in the last 6 months, it's going to be time weighted by 3. So anything from today to 5 months, 30 days later will be time weighted at 3. Now, depending on the type of violation, those have different severities, as I've mentioned. So the next thing is, if you have a violation in the last 6 months, as soon as it goes to the next weighted category of 6 months to 12 months, that violation drops to a time weight of 2. So again, speeding, 7 points happened in the last 6 months, multiplied by 3 gives you 21. As soon as it goes to the 6th to the 12th month, those 21 points now drop to 14. As they go from 12 months to 24 months, it drops from 21 to 14 to now 1 point. And that's kind of how that works. If we hire a new driver, do they get added to the SMS at their first inspection, or I need to add them to my fleet? Well, every time you add a new driver, they should be added to your fleet. Any of the violations that occur will not be attributed to your fleet, but they will still show up on the driver's score. So what you want to do is you want to do a review of their performance, and you can get access to the records because it's a public document. Or what I would actually do is, even before you hire the driver, you have that driver bring in their driver scores to you. So that's it for now. So I just wanted to conclude. We went through a lot of information here. I hope you found this useful in understanding how the SMS program works. Again, if you go to Fleet Complete's homepage, there's a section that's called Ask the Expert. You just click on that tab. That'll come directly to me. You can ask any questions pertinent to safety. I live and breathe this stuff. It'd be my pleasure to answer your questions. If you have additional questions you haven't thought of after this blog has come to an end, you can post them there. I'm going to be, as I said, putting a copy of this presentation on our website, and we're going to make this recording available to all participants on this webinar. If you want to provide any feedback, I'd appreciate any feedback you could provide. You can send the feedback to Fleet Complete, just giving the good, bad, and ugly of what you've liked. If there's a topic in the future you would like me to talk about, this would be the opportune time to do that. And I just wanted to sincerely thank you for your time today. So all the best and have a safe and productive day. Thank you.